Hi guys, so it's extremely frustrating to listen to Brexiteers talk absolute twaddle in the media, but what's actually worse than that is listening to your own side, Remainers, tap dance around the problem of Brexit. Now this is Emily Thornberry, she's a Labour MP, and she's going to respond to questions on Newsnight about the massive drop in trade that has taken place in January because of Brexit. But instead of actually criticising Brexit, she's going to, in a sense, tap dance around the issue. Let's hear what she had to say.
Well, I've written today to one of the trade ministers about those stats which they're using, which I do think are very are not reliable. But let's say even if it is, even if there are the same amount of lorries going backwards and forwards, which I don't think there are.
What she's talking about here is the fact that lorries are coming into the UK full. They're delivering goods into the UK, and then they're returning to the EU empty. Now, what's happening is this is happening because goods coming into the UK are not being really checked. Real checks are not being carried out, and this is a problem, or is potentially a problem that could harm the UK further down the road, due to certain let's say grace periods. The UK is able to allow goods to flow into the EU from the EU without checks. Now, goods moving out of the UK into the EU have to face checks. Now, it's not because of tariffs that's the problem. It's because of this extra paperwork. And we've seen reports, even by the BBC, of up to 20, 30 pages of documents that have to be completed for a single consignment. So she's talking about lorries coming in and out. And what's happening is the UK government are saying that, no, everything has returned to normal. Yes, in a sense, but if trucks are leaving the UK empty, then it's not normal.
It's what's in the lorries which is important. Are they coming in full and going out empty? Are they coming in half full and what is it that's in them? Counting the number of lorries in and off ro-ro ferries is not necessarily enough by itself. I think that certainly some of the problems are transitory. Some of the problems, we can't say just because that we had these terrible results in January that is going to continue. But I think there are three problems. One is that some of the problems are a fundamental consequence of the decisions that we made about the sort of Brexit that we wanted. So coming out of the customs union, coming out of the single market.
Okay, I wish you would be a bit more specific, or a bit more direct, I should say. I think it's also important to listen to who's listening. So to understand who's listening, in the sense that the public watching this will not understand the difference between being in the single market and being outside the single market, or being in the customs union and being outside the customs union. I think you need to be more direct and say the problem here is Brexit. Not the type of Brexit, but Brexit itself.
Does mean there will be barriers to trade that aren't just tariffs. I think the second thing is that the deal itself has failed to address a number of issues, which, as we've heard, certainly in terms of food, agricultural produce, and so on, we seem to have a worse regime than the New Zealanders do when it comes to exporting into Europe. And we have talked, we haven't talked about services, and obviously our economy fundamentally is a services economy, and there's next to nothing in the deal which helps to smooth the way for services. And the third thing is a lack of time and preparation. I mean, getting a deal on Christmas Eve or whenever it was, when we don't have enough vets, we don't have enough customs agents, and businesses simply haven't had enough time to prepare.
So Emily Thornberry, do you now regret voting for the deal? Do you think that was a mistake in December?
Okay, so you have to remember that the Labour Party convinced its MPs, whipped its MPs. Keir Starmer whipped his MPs, which means basically to force the MPs, or strongly convince them, to vote for this deal. So the party was whipped to support the deal. Now, I said at the time, in the run-up to this vote, I said, no, the Labour Party should have a free vote. Keir Starmer should not whip the party. He should say to his MPs, look, whether you agree with this deal, you can agree with this deal or you can disagree with this deal on your own political level. We're not going to tell you how to vote. Now, we can criticize the deal as a party. The parliamentary party can say, look, we don't like this deal. It's not good for Britain. It's a disaster, basically. But we're going to allow individual MPs to vote according to their conscience. But they did not do that. They whipped the party to support the Boris Johnson's Brexit deal. Now, I know some people were saying at the time, yes, but if they had convinced the party to abstain, then it probably wouldn't have gone through because there may have been a rebellion within the Conservative Party. It didn't actually turn out to be the case. That could have been because the Labour Party supported it, so there was no point rebelling. But there was a fear that there would be a rebellion and that perhaps Boris Johnson's deal wouldn't have gone through and the Labour Party would have been somehow blamed for that. Now, I don't think that would have been the case because Boris Johnson could blame them, but it's Boris Johnson who has the 80-seat majority. If he couldn't whip his own party to support it, then it's not the Labour Party's fault if it failed. But so at the time I said, no, it would make more sense. And there was the other option, of course, to abstain. And that would have, it would have seen the Labour Party branded as weak or running away from the Brexit vote or not willing to, to support the deal that was the consequence of the Brexit vote. What should have happened, as I said at the time, is that there should have been a free vote. The Labour Party said we're not happy with it. Keir Starmer saying he's not happy with it, but he would allow his MPs to vote as they want. That would have allowed him and people like Emily Thornberry to actually criticise the deal after, because she could say, look, I didn't vote for it because it was a bad deal. Now I'm going to criticise it. But she didn't do that. She voted for it, which, as I said at the time, would take away any possibility of her criticising the deal.
Listen, we lost the general election. And when we lost the general election, we lost the argument on staying in the European Union.
This is a ridiculous argument. That's like saying we lost the election, so that means that we can't criticise the government or we can't criticise the idea of not paying NHS staff a decent wage. Or it's like saying, well, we lost the election, so that means we can't criticise the government for throwing homeless people out onto the street or keeping homeless people on the street or throwing immigrants onto the street or whatever. Any issue. Oh, look, we lost the election, so we just roll over and accept whatever the government put put in front of us. What's the point in having an opposition if you're just going to roll over? This idea that, look, we lost the election, so then we just had to go along with Brexit. This is an idiotic position to hold. Now, some may say, well, it's the politically expedient way to approach the issue, but I don't agree, because Brexit is the problem here. You have to present an alternative. You can't just say, well, the deal that Boris Johnson presented, well, he's not implementing it correctly. That's not going to win people over to your side. You have to say, Brexit is the problem. I know it's going to piss off some people within the party, but Brexit is the problem. You have to convince these people that Brexit is the problem. Point it out to them. Show them. If somebody within the Labour Party still thinks Brexit is a good idea, then maybe it's not a good idea to have that person in the Labour Party. Because they're not operating within reality. So I think, unfortunately, the Labour Party have put themselves in a position where they can't criticise this deal because they voted for it. And Keir Starmer, unfortunately, whipped the party to vote for it.
And we had to move on. So that was the decision that was made. There was the Brexit vote, there was the general election. what we now have to do, I'm a pragmatic politician. What I want is the very best deal that we can have now with the European Union.
You have the deal that you voted for. You can't change it. Even if you wanted to change it, you don't have the political power to change it. Your only possibility is to criticize it. But as I said before, you can't criticize it because you voted for it. If Boris Johnson said tomorrow we're going to cut NHS staff by 50%, we're going to throw out 50% of the NHS staff, we're going to sack half of them, and you said, well, we'll have to vote for it because he's in power. What's the point in having an opposition if you just roll over and do whatever the government decide? I know some people will say, well, that's different because there was the referendum and it was upholding the referendum. But there was nothing in the referendum about leaving the single market and the customs union. There was nothing in the referendum about Northern Ireland. There's no reference to Northern Ireland or the single market or the customs union. So in a way, you're not upholding Brexit. You're not stopping Brexit in the way you're voting. But now you have to sell the idea to the public that Brexit is the problem. That's the only way, that's the only message I think the Labour Party can run on. The fishermen are suffering, it's because of Brexit. Keep it simple. You don't have to talk about the single market or customs union. You just have to say it's because of Brexit. First, you have to tell people why they're suffering. Because unfortunately, the media is telling them because, well, the EU is causing problems, or because of Boris Johnson's Brexit deal, that's the reason why the public are suffering. No, it's because of Brexit. The problems in Northern Ireland are because of Brexit. Stop giving water to Boris Johnson. Stop carrying water for Boris Johnson, I should say. The Labour Party need to stand up and say, Brexit is the problem. The solution is to get rid of Brexit. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. I want to say a big thank you to all of my patrons. You ensure that this channel continues to exist. I'm eternally grateful for all of your support. If you join Patreon, you will receive instant access to our Discord server, where we have both audio and video chats. You can chat with me and other patrons, where we discuss important and non-important issues. Becoming a patron per month costs about the same as a large coffee, so why not check it out?